The murky waters of the South Carolina swamp lapped at the edges of our small boat, each ripple sending a chill down my spine. The air was thick with humidity and the pungent smell of decaying vegetation. As I guided the boat deeper into the heart of the low country, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. My name is Ryan Cooper, and I've always been drawn to the thrill of exploring forgotten places. Urban exploration is my passion, my escape from the mundane. But this was different. The swamp held secrets darker than any abandoned building I'd ever encountered. It all started with a rumor, whispered in the shadowy corners of online forums dedicated to the weird and unexplained. An abandoned military bunker, hidden deep in the swamps, said to be the lair of a creature known as the LizardMan. Most people laughed it off as just another local legend, but something about it grabbed hold of me and wouldn't let go. I spent weeks researching, piecing together fragments of information from old newspaper clippings, declassified military documents, and eyewitness accounts. The story that emerged was like something out of a sci-fi horror movie. A secret government experiment gone wrong, a creature that was part man, part reptile, and reports of missing persons stretching back decades. My best friend Derek was skeptical when I first told him about it. "Come on, Ryan," he'd said, rolling his eyes. "A lizard man? Seriously, you're chasing fairy tales." But I knew Derek well enough to see the glimmer of interest in his eyes. Despite his protests, he was just as hungry for adventure as I was. It didn't take much convincing to get him on board. The real challenge had been Jenna. I'd met her at the ranger station when I was scouting the area, and she'd immediately caught my eye. Jenna Lee was smart, beautiful, and knew the swamps better than anyone. She was also adamantly against our expedition. "You don't know what you're getting into," she'd warned me, her dark eyes intense. "People go missing in those swamps all the time. It's dangerous, Ryan. Please just stick to the marked trails." I'd smiled, trying to charm her. "Come on, Jenna. Where's your sense of adventure?" She hadn't been amused. "This isn't a game, Ryan. The swamp doesn't forgive mistakes." Her words echoed in my mind now as we ventured further into uncharted territory. Derek sat at the front of the boat, his eyes scanning the shoreline. He'd been uncharacteristically quiet since we'd set out, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was having second thoughts. "You okay, man?" I called out to him. Derek turned, and for a moment I caught a strange look in his eyes, something cold and unfamiliar. But then he grinned, and he was my old friend again. "Never better. Just keeping an eye out for your lizard man." I chuckled, but it felt forced. The oppressive atmosphere of the swamp was getting to us both. As we rounded a bend in the river, I saw it, a concrete structure barely visible through the dense foliage. My heart raced with excitement. "There!" I shouted, pointing. "That's got to be it!" We moored the boat and stepped onto the muddy shore, our feet sinking slightly with each step. The bunker loomed before us, its walls covered in moss and vines. It looked like it had been there for decades, slowly being reclaimed by the swamp. "I can't believe we actually found it," Derek muttered, sounding both impressed and uneasy. I grinned, the thrill of discovery coursing through me. "Told you it was real. Come on, let's check it out." As we approached the entrance, I noticed strange markings carved into the concrete. They looked ancient, almost tribal, but with an unsettling precision that spoke of modern tools. I ran my fingers over the symbols, a shiver running down my spine. "What do you think these mean?" I asked Derek. He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Who knows? Probably just graffiti from other explorers." But I wasn't so sure. There was something about those markings that felt deliberate. Like a warning, we switched on our flashlights and stepped into the darkness of the bunker. The air inside was stale and damp, with an underlying odor that made my stomach churn. Our beams of light revealed long corridors lined with rusted metal doors, many hanging off their hinges. "This place is huge," Derek whispered, his voice echoing slightly. "How are we going to find anything in here?" I pulled out the rough map I'd pieced together from my research. According to this, the main lab should be in the central chamber. That's where we'll find answers. As we made our way deeper into the complex, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound amplified in the eerie silence. I tried to rationalize it. Old buildings made noises, and the swamp was full of wildlife. but a primal part of my brain was screaming at me to run. We found the central chamber, a large circular room filled with broken equipment and scattered papers. In the center stood a massive tank, its thick glass cracked but still intact. I approached it cautiously, shining my light inside. "Oh my God," I breathed. The bottom of the tank was covered in a thick, slimy substance, but it was the claw marks on the glass that made my blood run cold. Long, deep gouges that no human could have made. Derek came up beside me, his face pale in the flashlight beam. "Ryan," he said, his voice shaking. "Maybe Jenna was right. Maybe we shouldn't be here." I was about to agree when I heard it, a low, guttural sound that was neither human nor animal. We both froze, our eyes wide with fear. "What was that?" Derek whispered. Before I could answer, something large and fast moved in the shadows behind us. We spun around, our flashlights illuminating nothing but empty space. "We need to get out of here," I said, my heart pounding. Now, we ran, our footsteps echoing loudly in the empty corridors. Every turn looked the same, and I quickly realized we were lost. The sound of something pursuing us grew louder, accompanied by a strange, slithering noise that made my skin crawl. "This way!" Derek shouted, pointing down a corridor I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I followed him. We turned a corner and found ourselves facing a dead end. Panic set in as I realized our mistake. "Derek, why did you?" I began, but the words died in my throat as I turned to face my friend. Derek stood there, a strange smile on his face. In his hand was my map, crumpled and torn. "Sorry, Ryan," he said, but there was no remorse in his voice. "But I can't let you take the credit for this discovery." Before I could process what was happening, Derek shoved me hard. I stumbled backward, my head hitting the concrete wall with a sickening thud. As my vision blurred, I saw Derek running back the way we came, leaving me alone in the darkness. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke to the sound of splashing water. Disoriented and in pain, I stumbled to my feet. My flashlight was gone, leaving me in near total darkness. The splashing grew louder, accompanied by that same inhuman growl we'd heard earlier. Panic gave me strength, and I ran blindly through the corridors, one hand on the wall to guide me. I could hear something moving behind me, fast and getting closer. The smell of rotting vegetation and something else, something animal, filled my nostrils. Just when I thought my lungs would burst, I saw a faint light ahead. "The exit!" I pushed myself harder, ignoring the burning in my muscles. As I burst out of the bunker, the humid air of the swamp hit me like a wall. But my relief was short-lived. There, illuminated by the moonlight, was a sight that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. It was huge, at least 7 feet tall, with a body that was a nightmarish blend of human and reptile. Scales covered its muscular frame, gleaming wetly in the moonlight. Its head was elongated, with yellow eyes that glowed with predatory intelligence. But it was the hands that terrified me the most, human-like, but ending in razor-sharp claws. The lizardman. It was real. I stood frozen, unable to move as the creature regarded me with those alien eyes. It opened its mouth, revealing rows of serrated teeth, and let out a hiss that sounded almost like laughter. Just as it tensed to spring, a voice rang out from the darkness. "Ryan, duck!" I dropped to the ground instinctively as something whizzed over my head. There was a loud crack, and the lizardman roared in pain. I looked up to see Jenna standing there, a hunting rifle in her hands. "Run!" she shouted, already reloading. I didn't need to be told twice. I scrambled to my feet and ran towards her, the sound of the creature's enraged roars filling the air. Jenna fired again, buying us precious seconds. "This way," she said, grabbing my arm and pulling me into the underbrush. "I've got a boat hidden nearby." As we ran through the swamp, splashing through shallow water and ducking under low-hanging branches, I managed to gasp out, "How did you find me?" Jenna's face was grim in the moonlight. "I knew you wouldn't listen to my warnings. When I saw your friend Derek stumbling out of the swamp alone, I feared the worst." A pang of betrayal shot through me at the mention of Derek's name, but there was no time to dwell on it. We could hear the creature crashing through the vegetation behind us, getting closer with each passing second. We reached Jenna's boat, a small airboat perfect for navigating the shallow swamp waters. She pushed me in and jumped in after, starting the engine with practiced ease. The fan roared to life, and we shot forward just as the lizardman burst from the tree line. I watched in horror as the creature plunged into the water, swimming after us with incredible speed. "It's gaining on us," I shouted over the noise of the engine. Jenna's face was a mask of concentration as she navigated the twisting waterways. "Hold on," she yelled, making a sharp turn that nearly threw me from the boat. The maneuver bought us some distance, but the LizardMan was relentless in its pursuit. As we rounded another bend, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. Derek, clinging to a fallen tree in the middle of the channel. "Derek!" I cried out, my anger at his betrayal momentarily forgotten in the face of his peril. Jenna saw him too and began to slow the boat. But before we could reach him, the water around Derek erupted. In a spray of water and a flash of scales, he was gone, dragged beneath the surface with a scream that cut off abruptly. I stared at the spot where he had been, my mind refusing to process what I'd just seen. Jenna's voice snapped me back to reality. "Ryan, we have to go!" "Now!" She gunned the engine, and we shot forward once more. I clung to the side of the boat, my eyes fixed on the churning water behind us. For a moment, I thought we'd lost the creature. Then, with a roar that seemed to shake the very air, the LizardMan burst from the water directly in front of us. Jenna swerved hard, the sudden motion throwing me off balance. I felt a searing pain across my back as the creature's claws raked across it, tearing through my shirt and into flesh. The force of the blow sent me tumbling into the swamp. The cold, murky water closed over my head. In the darkness, I felt something brush against my leg, something large and scaled. Panic gave me strength, and I kicked hard, breaking the surface with a gasp. "Ryan!" Jenna's voice seemed to come from far away. I saw the boat circling back towards me, Jenna's face a mask of determination. But the LizardMan was closer. I could see its glowing eyes just feet away, moving towards me with terrifying speed. In that moment, I was certain I was going to die. Then, a deafening roar filled the air, but not from the creature. A spotlight suddenly illuminated the water, and I heard the rhythmic thump of helicopter blades. The LizardMan hissed in anger and dove beneath the surface, disappearing into the murky depths. Strong hands grabbed me, pulling me into Jenna's boat. As she sped us towards the shore, I saw multiple boats converging on our location, their searchlights cutting through the darkness. The helicopter hovered overhead, its spotlight scanning the water. We reached the shore where a group of men in military uniforms waited. They quickly surrounded us, their faces grim. An older man with a scarred face approached, his eyes locked on me. "Ryan Cooper?" he asked, his voice gravely. When I nodded weakly, he continued, "I'm Colonel Hawkins. You and Miss Lee are going to have to come with us." As they led us to a waiting vehicle, I caught snippets of radio chatter. "Containment breach, asset not yet recovered, initiate Protocol Omega." My head was spinning, both from the night's events and blood loss from the wound on my back. As a medic began treating me, I turned to Jenna. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head, her expression a mix of fear and resignation. "I don't know, Ryan, but I have a feeling our adventure is far from over." The last thing I remember before passing out was Colonel Hawkins's voice, speaking into a satellite phone. "Sir, we have a situation. The Lazarus Project has been compromised." The realization that there were more of these creatures out there, potentially smarter and more dangerous than the one we encountered, filled me with dread. But it also ignited a spark of the same curiosity that had led me into the swamp in the first place. As for Derek, his body was never found. Sometimes in my nightmares I see him, changed, transformed into something no longer human, lurking in the dark waters of the swamp. Jenna and I were eventually released, sworn to secrecy under threat of prosecution. But we both knew we couldn't just walk away from what we had discovered. There were more secrets hidden in those swamps, more horrors waiting to be uncovered. As we stood outside the military compound, about to go our separate ways, Jenna turned to me. "So," she said, a small smile playing on her lips despite the gravity of our situation. "Still got that sense of adventure?" I looked at her, then back at the distant tree line where I knew the swamps and the secrets they held. Waited. "You know," I said, feeling a familiar thrill of excitement mixed with fear, "I think I'm just getting started." And with that, we set off, ready to face whatever horrors the swamps of South Carolina had in store for us. Because sometimes, the darkest secrets are the ones that call to us the loudest. And for better or worse, I knew I'd always answer that call.